Okay, so let me go back to the first screen. All right, the Fair Housing Act and its amendments protect, everybody knows this, right?
Race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or disability, familial status, covers discrimination related to residential real property only, not personal property. Rena, what's personal property versus residential?
Personal and residence.
Right, what's personal property? Would a house be a personal property?
The furniture and the stuff, all the
Thank-
stuff,
Yeah,
the
it was a
gold,
trick question.
money, clothes.
Your belongings, exactly. So obviously it does not cover that. Well, some of the behaviors that we're going to cover in this is steering, which refers to the practice of influencing potential buyers to buy only in certain areas or neighborhoods on the basis of their protected class. And do you remember that from school?
Yes.
It's something we don't really talk about, but yet we should be, because steering includes directing buyers such as minority members of us or a specific religion to certain areas. You know, I have often heard, and buyers have even asked, you know, can I go into a certain area? You cannot talk about it. That is steering. That is a big no-no. You can say, oh, would you like to be in Suwannee or Cumming, or what areas would you like? You know, that type of thing, certainly, but you cannot discuss much more than that. And not sure if you're aware, but anybody that's been discriminated against, and HUD itself can file a complaint against a person. Hi guys, I see Sheena and I see Kimberly. Hi there.
Hello.
We're talking about steering right now, as well as complaints for HUD. So the complaint must be filed in writing or proper state local agency within 1 year that you've been discriminated against. And a civil suit can be brought up to 2 years of when the event happened. There are times that a local agency or HUD will send secret shoppers. Did you guys know this? There are people that are going to look like buyers or sellers, and they're really investigators. Everybody aware of that?
I saw in the school, the
Yeah.
videos and all.
Yeah, and the reality is people think that doesn't happen. It does. And they are going to sound the same because they're going to ask you the exact same questions. And they're going to see if you answer differently based on their religion or their ethnicity. This is basically done to see how you respond. Here's the biggest key. Discrimination is not always intentional, but the effect is what matters, not the intent. So you could have said something not realizing that you were being discriminatory, but you are being discriminatory. So you could later say, but I didn't mean. It doesn't matter. Now, if it's blatant, that's considered overt discrimination. So one example of overt discrimination would be, I'm not going to rent it to a pregnant mother, or I'm not going to rent it to a Jewish family. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race in the purchase, sale, lease, and the conveyance. I can't speak today. Or the conveyance of real or personal property. You see that? This one actually includes personal property. In 1962, an executive order guaranteed racial non-discrimination in housing financed by FHA or VA guaranteed loans. So to put this in a nutshell, FHA and VA were basically the first ones to really talk about housing and how real estate should be handled to prevent discrimination. In 64, the Civil Rights Act of that year was passed, and that prohibited, and I know this is a lot of verbiage, but we're going to get into what's really relevant to you guys in a moment, prohibiting racial discrimination in any housing program that received whole or partial federal funding. So basically FHA receives federal funding, right? So 68, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 68, And that is what we have come to know as the Fair Housing Act. Its purpose is to provide for the fair housing and equal housing opportunities. 88, the definition was added to add disabled persons. Now you notice I'm using the word disabled, right, guys? We're going to talk about that in a moment. Definition of disabled includes physically disabled, mentally disabled. When the law was amended in 1988, handicapped was added as the protected class. But here we go, that word handicap. Who here still uses the word handicap? I know I have, but don't. It's not correct. You have to use disabled, okay? So that's one of the things I want you guys to keep in mind, write it down, keep it in your notes, put it in your mind, in your library, in your mind, because it should be disabled. Never use the word handicapped. I still have a hard time. I'll be like, where's the handicapped bathroom when I had my dad living with us? It's not handicapped. Persons with a handicap or mental, you can have a handicap, you just can't call them handicapped. Persons with a handicap or mental or physical disability are defined as persons who have a physical or mental impairment. Here's the key, guys, that substantially limits any of their major activities, such as taking care of themselves, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, working. Here we go. If a real estate professional violates the law and discriminates, look at these severe penalties, guys. We're not joking around here. This is why I wanted to do this class. You will lose your license. But in addition to losing your license, you could have civil damages and penalties. They can go after you. Criminal prosecution, stripes. You will have the striped wardrobe. And fines and imprisonment, different color of stripes. Bottom line, golden rule, treat everybody the same. Everybody. I don't care who you are. Here are the most common violations. Blockbusting, improper listing. Go ahead.
One place, it says handicap access, not disabled area or kind of. So I thought maybe it's used, I don't know. I mean, I never
Well,
used
it's still
personally.
used, but it's not correct. And I still, that's where I'm saying, I tend to still use that word because we grew up with it,
Yeah.
but you want to try to get it out of your vocabulary. But yes, there's still going to be handicapped access, things like that. But the correct term is
Disabled.
yeah. And guys, let me know if you can't see me properly. Someone just told me that because I'm looking at my, can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't need to be looking up my nose. So the most common violations are blockbusting, improper listings, showing property to minorities, steering, advertising, and less favorable treatment to protected classes. And the first two of these occur in working with a seller, and the last four occur when you're working with a buyer, right? Does everyone know what all these are? Or do you,
Yes.
come on, open up your microphones. Tell me what they are before I go to the next screen.
Blockbusting is like, you pressurize seller with the market and some ideas to sell the property. And steering means you send them on certain area according to their race and whatever, and you tell them to buy somewhere. So that's a steering.
Correct. What about improper listing? Kimberly, do you know what that is?
Sorry, I missed the question, Deborah. I was talking.
Oh, no worries. Do you know what an improper listing is?
I don't think by definition.
Okay. What about a violation for advertising? We all know what that is, right?
Yeah, I mean, you cannot have on certain newspaper or something which is basically on certain race. It should be available to every person.
Correct. And we're going to look at that. So basically, blockbusting is when we get a listing by conveying the information about a minority group. So you were partially right, Rena, but it's more about the minority group. So it moving into a neighborhood. And then when a salesperson uses an intensive solicitation campaign, like phone calls, emails, letters, door to door, in a neighborhood whose makeup is changing in terms of one or more minority groups. So if you go and knock on the door and you say to a Georgia Peach, basically, wow, this is really becoming a Latin neighborhood. Why are you living here? That would be blockbusting. So here's an example. Want to read it for me, Kimberly?
Let me see here. Yes. Example 1. A salesperson was trying to get a listing on the Jones house by convincing them to sell and move somewhere else. The salesperson states that a minority family had bought a house down the street from them. This is a violation of the law since the salesperson stated that a change was occurring in the racial makeup of the neighborhood in order to induce the Jones to sell. This is a true story from the Real Estate Commission, and the salesperson's license was suspended for a year. I hope this was like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a very used one. But yeah, as you can see, you would lose your license at least for a year by doing something like this. Rena, you want to read this one?
A Latino salesperson was canvassing a neighborhood looking for a home for a buyer. The salesperson approached one, what is this called?
Caucasian.
Caucasian homeowner whose house was not for sale and asked if she would be willing to sell. When the owner asked why she had been approached by so many real estate professionals recently, the salesperson replied, because more Latinos are moving in. The owner stated that she had no desire to leave the neighborhood before leaving. The salesperson said, if you want to stay here, that's fine. We are glad to have you. It's nice to know you are not afraid. So, I mean, yeah, that's bad.
That's pretty overt. Yeah. So she was fine until the point that she said, it's nice to know you're not afraid.
Yeah.
And this
And
salesperson.
also, you can't say that Latino or particular race is moving, so you are not good.
Well, no, let's not say any of that. But what really got her in this one was that it's nice to know you're not afraid. So the salesperson, this person's license was also suspended for 1 year. And here's what an improper listing would be, guys. When listing a property and and this has happened to me, I shared this with you at the vision class. If the seller imposes restrictions as to who they will sell to, you need to just walk away. You cannot take that listing, because if they say, well, I'm only going to sell it to this type of person, if it falls under the fair housing, then you have to just walk away. If they say, I'm only going to sell it to brown-haired women, that would be a violation. But if they said, I'm only going to sell it to people that work at Coca-Cola, that's not a violation, obviously. So it just has to be fitting the fair housing. We're not going to go too deep into this, but who here uses love letters? Anybody?
Who here uses them or who here receives them?
Oh, we all receive them. But I'm going to go into that in a second too, Kimberly. Sheena, were you going to say anything? Have you used a love letter?
I have, but it was for FESBO a while ago.
Okay.
My client actually went to the house herself. She spoke with the seller. They fell in love with each other. And then when we put in our offer, we actually included a letter just so that she knew who we were. But I understand that I probably would never do that again. That was when I first started out in real estate.
Yeah, we all learn, right?
Yeah.
So never use a love letter. When it comes to the person, you can use a house love letter, guys. You can write a letter stating how much I love your house. I love the high ceilings. I love that large kitchen. Just don't include anything about the buyer. So don't necessarily discount the love letter idea, but talk about the house. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very smart idea.
Yeah, so you just, wow, I really love the decorating in your house. I love those large ceiling, those vaulted ceilings. But when it comes to the buyer has 3 kids that they love, can't wait to play in your backyard. There you go. You've violated the fair housing. Kimberly, what do you do when you receive those love letters? Oops, she might be on a call. So that as you want to refrain as an agent, talking about the buyers. Always work on the ability to purchase. They are very qualified buyers, and you will get to the closing table. Whoops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that. And you will get to the closing table, and that's all that matters, right, guys?
Exactly.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So when you receive a love letter, you get the offer from the agent and the buyer's agent, and they say, hey, this is the offer, this is the letter that they are sending to the seller. And the letter says, oh, we're gonna get married, we're gonna dreaming about this house, play here in the backyard, whatever. And well, they did write the letter themselves, not the agent. And
Right.
the agent is asking me to show the letter with the offer to my client.
Yeah, I let the other agent know I will not include that letter.
Okay, because I don't want my client to be influenced or anything because
Yeah.
of that letter. Okay.
Yeah, if they want to say, if they complain about it, you can go that far. I'm very cut and dry when it comes to negotiating. So I just say, sorry, it's not going to be included.
Okay.
Very simple. If they go further, then then you can explain it.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah, you definitely want to protect yourself, and technically you're protecting them too.
And another question is about when you're talking to your seller about staging the property. I always tell them, because they're for example, I may have a seller that not only the personal pictures but also the religious images or things like that. I tell them it's better to be completely appealing to everybody and remove every religion, everything that is personal.
I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't say it that way. I always just simply state, we want a blank palette so that the buyers know that they can move right in. And if you have photos or anything personal, it's going to make the buyers believe you're not ready to go.
Correct. Exactly. But I made this topic because the topic of religion is one of them. But anything that is personal, for example, I went with my buyers to one home, and this guy was, I think he was in the military. He had a huge collection of trophies and medals, a lot of things, and it was beautiful. But they stay in that room for the whole house. For the whole tour, and they didn't pay attention to anything else.
Right.
So that's to me. Even though it's admirable and everything, they wanted to sell the house. No, they didn't want to sell the
items.
Yeah.
No, and I get it. I agree 100%. But I just, when I'm talking to my sellers, I wouldn't say, let's remove all the religious, just don't mention religion or ethnic.
Okay.
I simply state, remove everything personal, because I want to show a blank palette.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
let the buyers know that you're ready to go, that the house is ready to be sold.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. So again, steering is when an agent steers or purchases or pushes a buyer toward or away from a neighborhood with a protected class. And we already talked about that. Advertising discrimination. So we've got to this is where I think many of us fail. And it's prohibited by not only the federal fair housing laws, also with state laws. So always you need to avoid it. And so often it's not intentional, but you got to be careful. How often have I seen great family starter home or great for the kids,
A mother-in-law suite.
mother-in-law suite? I like to just say additional ensuite or apartment or unit or but yeah, mother-in-law suite, his and hers bathrooms or his and her showers. You just have to be so careful these days. So just be very careful. Mhm.
I have a
Somebody-
question.
Yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
So I have a list, well, not a listing. My buyers are looking at a listing right now, and it's agent owned, and the agent put in the description multi-generational area or something like that instead of a mother-in-law suite. Is that acceptable, a multi-generational
I
living space?
mean, I don't think she'd get in trouble for it. That's an interesting one. I don't know that I'd use that, but I mean, I don't think she's violating anything. That's an interesting one.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if you're questioning it, just don't use it.
Right.
Like, and then here's some examples. Great bachelor pad close to the city and clubs. Could be a nice starter home close to the Catholic Church and a synagogue. Who can tell me what items in this ad are violating the law?
Catholic Church.
What
No,
was that?
church is fine. Catholic church is fine, right? We can point out near church and temple, but
I'll
not
let you know in a minute.
specific, but
So
not
you say, so what do you think is violating the law there?
bachelor.
Okay, anybody else?
And synagogue, I don't know how you pronounce that and what does it mean, but
Synagogue.
it looks like that's a red flag.
Well, if the Catholic Church is not a red flag, why would a synagogue? Synagogue is just a Jewish temple. But here's the reality. Bachelor pad implies that only single men should be looking at the home. So it discriminates against women, couples, and families, right? A local church and synagogue implies that only Jewish people, or I forgot to put Catholic, but only Jewish and Catholic people should look at it. So that's also a violation. So a better statement would be something like open floor plan, home ready for your buyers close to shopping and city. So no, you cannot
We can
put,
still write only church and temple, not the mention Hindu temple or right.
no, because then you're still implying religion.
I don't know where I've read that you can always tell that it's near to this area,
If
like
they ask
church
you
and
to know where the nearest church is, you can tell them,
yeah.
but you can't advertise that.
Oh, gotcha.
That would be an improper advertisement. Listing agent tells buyer after property went binding that the seller has HIV or AIDS, and then the buyer's agent tells the buyers, and the buyers decide to terminate the contract. Has a violation happened?
I would say yes by the listing agent.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
I think we can tell them, right? If they have any, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not
No.
sure.
So HIV and AIDS is a protected class. So that information can never be divulged. And a violation would have occurred by both agents.
And also now cancer, right? If they have cancer.
Yep. Cancer is another protected class. Let's look at the protected class. So we know that the Congress prohibited discrimination against those with physical and mental handicaps. And this law did not apply to any other types of real property than housing. But when Congress passed the law in 1990, so relatively recently, it prohibited discrimination against those with disabilities. And that also included public accommodation and commercial facilities. This law was then known as the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. And this law guarantees equal opportunity to those with mental or physical disabilities for employment, state, local government services, public accommodations, telecommunications, and transportation. A person with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment and that substantially limits one or more major life activities or has a record. That part right there is important, guys. Has a record of such impairment or is regarded as having such an impairment. So I'm going to briefly go into that. So the person had cancer. She's now in remission or he's now in remission. They are still protected. What if I was misdiagnosed with cancer? Would I be protected? Anybody? Would I be protected if my doctor misdiagnosed me?
I want to say no, but then I want to say no because there's a record. Well, there's a record that you had cancer, but that was
No, I
inaccurate.
never had cancer. It was a misdiagnosis.
Right. But he wrote it in there at some point in time, and then he took it out at some point in time.
So am I protected? Yes or no?
I would say yes.
Gina, you're correct. Look at that last sentence, or is regarded as having such an impairment, or has a record of such an impairment. Correct. So they are protected, even if it was misdiagnosed. Who can name the protected disabilities under the ADA? You named cancer, so we know cancer, we know AIDS. What else?
Disabled people, just
What was that?
disabled people, all categories, no, less hearing, speaking, breathing, can't do anything on their own. They need support for many stuffs.
They'd be covered.
Yeah, those are the people who use
What
wheelchairs
about
most of the time.
Yeah. What about some other conditions? Anybody can name anything else?
What about amputees?
Yeah, that would be covered. So let's go ahead and look at the whole list. Look at this. There's no complete list of the disabilities, but basically HIV, cancer, diabetes. Did you realize diabetes is a protected class?
My husband has.
It's a protected class. My grandson's a type 1 diabetic. I've mentioned it before.
Yeah.
He's treated like a normal person, but say it, we go to Disney World, he gets the super speed pass.
Wow, so my husband can get it?
So the speed pass
For the kids.
with Disney World is only for type 1, but that's just an example. But yes, as diabetes, it's a protected class. Epilepsy, paralysis, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, intellectual disability, emotional illness, that could be bipolar, that could be anything like that, visual or hearing impairment. So those are a couple of them. Civil Rights Act of 64 prohibits discrimination against individuals because of their race, color, gender, national origin, or religion. And yes, we've heard that over and over, but I just want to keep making sure y'all are aware of it. The ADA does add the disability to those who are protected from discrimination. Here's another thing. Here are the things that are not disabilities. Current illegal drug use. And why did I put current illegal drug use? If somebody
Because if they're in recovery.
Because if they're in recovery, what?
Something about if they're in recovery, they're part of a protected class, right? But they can't
Thank
be
you.
actively
That's what I was.
using.
Yep. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. If somebody tells you I'm a recovering addict, that is a protected class and you cannot divulge that. That is a protected class. You treat it just like you would somebody that's an amputee or has diabetes or anything. But if they are currently using drugs, they are not protected. Transvesticism, transsexualism, sexual behavior disorders, pyromania or kleptomania, compulsive gambling, homosexuality or bisexuality. You can't discriminate against a homosexual, right? Or bisexual, but that's based on gender identity, not disability. Advanced age, normal pregnancy, predisposition to illness, Common traits such as quick temper. Boy, we'd all be disabled if these things were considered disabled, right? As far as quick temper. We're going to discuss service animals and ESA another day. But let's look at a couple things here that I want to make sure, because who here has had a tenant say, I have a service animal? Anybody?
I don't
No?
have
No
dogs
one?
or anything, but I've seen service dog. They are totally different. In Bank of
Correct.
America, we were allowing service dog with on Taylor line, not any other pets. So
Correct. So if somebody has a true service animal, it is no different than a
human.
wheelchair.
Yeah.
It's medical equipment. All right. It is not considered a pet. So the service animals you have are dealt with by the Department of Justice and the ADA. And this is, I want to go to the part. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
The ADA? Okay. So service animals are defined as dogs that are individually trained to do work or perform tasks for people with disabilities. And that could be guiding people that are blind, alerting people who are deaf, pulling a wheelchair, alerting or protecting a person who's having a seizure, reminding a person with mental illness to take their prescribed medications, et cetera, et cetera. How many of you have heard, oh, I have a certificate for my dog? If somebody tells you that, guess what? They're most likely not a service animal. Because those that, but you can't fight it. We're going to go into that in a moment, because this is what, even if you haven't dealt with it yet, you will most likely deal with it at some point. So basically, a service animal here is an assistance animal under, let me go here. Okay, let's go to where service animals are allowed. Under the ADA, they basically have to be allowed in,
We don't have your screen now.
oh, I don't, you don't? That's weird. Let me stop it. Let me go back into it. That's kind of weird. There we go. Can you see it now? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's look at right here, where service animals are allowed. So under the ADA, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but do you think that service animals are allowed at Kroger or Publix?
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. What about a restaurant?
Everywhere, like wherever they go.
Same place that a wheelchair would be allowed.
Exactly.
Everywhere. So you have to understand, if you have a no pet policy at a landlord, as a landlord, and they tell you they have a service animal, can you charge them a pet deposit?
No.
No, we spoke about it the other day.
Correct. Absolutely not. You cannot charge a pet deposit. It is the same as if it were a wheelchair. You wouldn't charge for a wheelchair. You're not going to charge for an animal. In addition to that, can you ask them for paperwork?
I think,
Can you ask a service animal owner for paperwork?
I mean, that's rude, but if you
I'm
have doubt, I think we cannot, but if we have doubt, still we cannot ask. I don't know. I mean,
Nope, you cannot ask. You can ask 2 questions, and I'm trying to find that because it usually has the questions.
Yeah, because what happened if they're making that up? Like, oh, this is my comfort animal, and I just
Emotional.
feel happier when I have him around.
So if they tell you that, you can ask, is it a service animal? Or is it so basically right here, look at this. Dogs whose sole function is to provide comfort or emotional support do not qualify as service animals. So if they are an ESA, that is different than a service animal. But here's the key, guys. If they tell you they have a service animal, you have to take it for their word. You cannot fight it, because you fight it, you're going to be dealing with the ADA. If they are making it up, which many do, and we know that, that's on them. However, if you go to the house on a visit and the person whose service animal is supposedly the service animal's there, but the person's not, then we know that's not a service animal. But I still caution you to just not fight it. Service animals must be under control. You know, obviously, if the service animal is biting or barking like crazy or nipping at your feet, I can tell you it's probably not. So here, this is when you open up the PowerPoint or the recording, I always upload the PowerPoints into the reference area of Paperless. You can go to this link. This is a very important link. This pretty much tells you everything. So here are the only 2 questions you can ask, especially Rena, like you said, if you have a question or if you're in doubt, you have 2 questions you can ask. Number 1, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? These are the 2 questions you need to memorize. And number 2, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Those are the only 2 questions you can ask. You cannot ask about what disability it is. You cannot require medical documentation. You cannot require a special ID card or training documentation, or you cannot ask the dog to demonstrate, or for the dog to demonstrate the ability. Allergies and fear of dogs are not valid reasons for denying access or refusing service to people. When a person who is allergic to dog dander and a person who uses a service animal must spend time in the same room or facility, for example, in our situation, if you are renting it to somebody with a service animal, a house, and the owner plans on living there later and they're allergic to it, then, for example, they both should be accommodated. So the way you could accommodate something like that is you could ask the tenant to just clean the house after, you know, carpet clean, professionally doing it, because of my allergy. That would be the only thing you could do. But just, I've seen all too often people asking, you know, for paperwork, medical documentation. You can't. You just can't. Yes, your landlord's going to lose the deposit, the dog deposit, because they can't ask for it, but you're protecting everybody involved. This really doesn't apply to us. I'm not going to really go into this. Oh, yeah, we talked about this before for some of you that were on my classes. What animals are service animals? What can be an actual service animal? Anyone?
An animal that has been trained.
Right. What kind? What breed? What kinds?
I guess dogs.
A dog
I don't know
for
what other animals. I don't know.
So here it is, guys. There's only one other animal that can be a service animal. Miniature horse.
Miniature horse. A
That's
pony?
it. It's not a pony. It's a miniature horse. It's a specific type of animal. I know somebody that has one. It's not a service animal, but they have a miniature horse as a pet. They're not ponies. They're miniature horses.
Oh.
But those
Yeah.
are the only 2 animals that are actual service animals. So if somebody tells you I have a service cat, then you can say, is it an ESA? Is it an emotional support cat? Because you can have an emotional support animal that can be anything. But emotional support animals are not protected by the ADA. So the ADA only protects service animals. All right.
Okay.
So that's what I just wanted you guys to understand that, and understand that basically think of a service animal as a medical device. And that if you think of it that way, that'll protect you. Your takeaways for today, I want it to be treat everybody the same, no matter who they are. Stay relevant to the properties. So when you're showing a property, talk about areas, talk about housing qualifications, financing qualifications. I know we deal with people in our business, but in our society and the day we live in today, think about the house and the product you're selling. And the buyer would be the qualification and how you're going to get to the closing table. Leave everything else out to be protected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and how about the school rating?
What?
School ratings?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. In Florida, we're not allowed to talk about schools. So it's interesting that in Georgia we are. I would personally not keep everything as far as opinions out of it, and do exactly what you're saying. The school rating, you can send them to greatschools.org. You can send them to the county websites for the schools, and you can advise them to do their own research regarding the schools. If they ask you, is it a good school? Don't answer by saying yes or no, just, or is it's a sought after school? That's another thing. You could just say, I can give you the school rating website and you can look at comments there. I advise you to go visit the school, talk to people. You can do things like that, but just keep your opinions out of it.
What about
And
in the listing?
in the listing, well, it's going to say the school in the listing, but you mean more like sought after school district?
Yeah, like people put top rated schools, highly sought after. Yeah, that like I never put it because I'm always like, that feels weird to me. But then I see other people put it.
Well, if you say, what I have done in the past when I've listed properties, I have said, high, how did I put it? Standard accredited, like the testing, high testing rates, because those are true. Those are facts. So highly, one of the top rated schools as per the school rate, as school testing, things like that, as long as you keep it factual. Highly sought after, I'm not too against either, because it is a highly sought after area. You're not personally saying that anything one way or the other, but it is a gray area. So I'm with you, Kim. But I don't think I think you're okay. Now, when you put good schools, that's a different story. Just avoid putting good schools.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I always feel like those terms are subjective, right? Like I'm like, what defines good? Like even if you look on great schools, are you saying good as anything a 5 or above? Or are you saying it's good only if it's a 9 out of 10 type thing? Like,
Exactly.
I mean,
And that's why what I do is I advise them to go to greatschools.org or to the websites for the county. I advise them to go visit them. I advise them to speak with other parents. And then I tell them, let me know what school district you want me to look for, if that's how you want me to look for it in a search. But you're not giving them your opinion. Usually at that point, they'll come back to you and say, okay, I want something that's 3 or higher. Okay, what schools were they? Oh, you want, you want Brookwood? Okay, no problem. I'll look up Brookwood. I'll look up Parkview. And I always remind them when I send them to great schools, I remind them that it is subjective. And I also remind them that school districts can change year to year. So as long as you're protecting yourself and keeping yourself's opinion out of there, you're in a good place.
okay, got it. Yeah, that is true. Because the school could get a new principal and it'd be a whole different grade the next year.
Or the boundaries can change, So yeah, absolutely. That's why in Florida, they just never had we didn't even have the schools in the MLS. But what I would suggest also, as far as opinions, now that we're talking about opinions, is again, that love letter. That is a technique that I do tell you to use. Just make sure you're using the house love letter, because you can't discriminate against the house. So you're technically still getting on that feel good with that seller, but it's more about the house. It's only about the house. Don't go into areas, you know, unless you wanted to say something like, can't wait to climb Stone Mountain, you know, because the house will be within 10 minutes or something like that. That's okay. Just keep anything to do with, you know, race, ethnicity, etc. Any questions? How's everyone's week gone?
Far okay.
Yeah. Market changing for you guys?
Yeah. Super slow.
Yeah. So what is the lesson with the market changing?
I mean, I
What?
keep educating people, trying to, you know, give them more options of the interest rate and good deals. And I tell them that there is good deals. Sometimes they negotiate more than the listing price. And I'm trying to make them interested. So I have people, they are keep looking, but not making any decision.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because they will see you as the expert. So keep on them, keep making sure that you're keeping in touch with them, and don't get scared. Homes always sell, even in a bad market. So there's always going to be buyers and sellers. Just keep your heads up and keep your confidence up and keep learning, because I'm telling you, education and knowing everything we're learning, and you guys that are coming every Wednesday, the more you know, the more you're going to be able to succeed in a tough market. Because those that aren't educated and aren't knowledgeable of what's happening and the laws, when this market shifts like it is shifting, they're the ones that you're going to see cut. And if you're going into a listing, I say competition, because it's going to be back to, I'm going to interview 3-4 agents. That's when you're going to stand out. So I applaud you guys for being here and being committed to learning. All right, well, you guys have a fabulous day and week, and I wish you lots of success this week.
Thank you.
Bye.